it has occurred to me, stop me if I've done this before, you probably won't remember. I have been giving the subject some thought. How would I deal with if I ran the afterlife? If I were God, how should I best allocate the afterlife for people? So, um, and I think the fairest way is to say, well, if you're part of this religion or claim to be, part of, that religion, even though you're a hypocrite, um, you would be um, you'd be treated mercifully. And by this, I would give people a degree of latitude. I'm not going to say, oh, you broke the Sabbath. And I could say, okay, let's count it as one crime, even though you broke lots of Sabbaths, maybe 100 of them, because while claiming to be a Jew, you just didn't keep the Sabbath. But it does say in your holy Torah that breaking the Sabbath attracts the penalty of death. And then this Jew dies, and he thinks, hooray! I lived and died and did not suffer the death penalty for breaking the Sabbath, and God knows how many I broke in my unobservant Jewish life, my non-observant Jewish life. Hello, Peppy. And so you think, well, you could make it. You could make this person, this Jew who dies and meets his maker, who says, well, I count that you have broken 350 Sabbaths in your life. That doesn't mean that you will be stoned to death, resurrected, stoned to death, resurrected for 350 times, or will they all be taken into consideration? Well, I don't know, right? I mean, I'm being a kind, forgiving person, and also conscious of my own foibles. I would wish to be, leniently treated, and it is already quite bad to be stoned to death, particularly after a lifetime of, well, I mean, it will be quite a shock to the Jew, thinking, oh, I thought I was just going to be left alone to sleep forever. And then he's faced with, well, you've broken 350 Sabbaths in your pathetic little life, and you will be stoned to death and resurrected, and stoned to death and resurrected, and then okay, let's say it's all done. He's been stoned to death, resurrected, stoned to death before, however many times he broke the Sabbath, and then it's like, well, it seems you have committed some sexual offences, and then it's like, well, there's fornication, and since you were bi-curious, you did commit an act of sodomy with another man, and then oh yes, and there's adultery, and then oh yes, there's some bestiality because you're, and on it goes. So it could be quite a few terrible deaths and being resurrected just to suffer another execution. And so I don't think we should be. I don't think we should be envying Jews, even though we might think in this life they get to dictate U.S. foreign policy, which I think is silly anyway. Of course, they don't get to dictate American foreign policy, although a lot of people think the Americans are stupid. They're not that stupid. Certainly, the people who get to the top, who run U.S. foreign policy in the State Department and get to the top in the military-industrial complex, well, they're not stupid, and I'm sure they are very skilled in the use of psychology and getting people to do things without even knowing that they are doing certain things. And I think Jews have fallen victim to this imperial practice of sending Jews to Israel, which I suppose, yes, technically it's a holy land, but, it only depends on who is running it and how people live in it that makes it holy or unholy. So if it is true that if that Israel is an American colony and Jews have just been sent by America to people their colony and serve the interests of American imperialism, then they are a people to be pitied for being so credulous as to think that America protects them, when really all it is doing is sending them to go and live and breed in their colony, since no Gentile would want to go and live there willingly, would they? I know the British were in the process of creating a religion called British Israelism, and it was with a view to getting Gentile British soldiers and their women to go and live in Israel. And of course, nobody wants to do that. But anyway, they got the Jews to do it themselves. So good on you, Uncle Sam. In your Zionist project, you managed to do it for about 80 years and just stoked up anti-Semitism by privileging Jews, by shutting up Gentiles who just want to ask, well, why are we paying for Israel? Is it necessary for us to, do all this? And then and then they be called Nazis and anti-Semites, and then creating exactly the anti-Semitism that they pretend they are so anxious to prevent. But what they're doing is stoking up anti-Semitism and of course Islamophobia by their immigration. So this is what we have to understand is going on in the background of Christian Zionism. It is Christian Zionism. It's not Jewish Zionism. Yes, of course, some Jews think it's Jewish Zionism, but who is running the country? Who gets to go to Israel and convert Jews to Christianity? Well, it's Christian missionaries, right? Yes, occasionally you get, some Jews getting violent and spitting on Christian missionaries, particularly if they're naive women from East Asia shouting at Jews for not having already converted to Christianity. Of course, this enrages them. So basically, Israel is being run under the principles of Christian Zionism, because the idea is that in order to keep the supply of Jews in Israel constant, they will have to keep lowering standards of observance of Judaism. And that's why the religious Jews are complaining when they said, oh, you can convert to Reform Judaism and then call yourself a Jew and then come to Israel. They were shocked and horrified. But it just shows you how little even these Jews know about what's being done to them. And then the religious Jews said, why can't, we have the right of return, supposedly, and one of my very, observant relations, after a lifetime of being a Jew in America, they want to go and retire in Israel and be holy and end their days there and be buried in the Holy Land. And why can't they go? Well, why is the immigration officer asking for my friend's grandfather's birth certificate? Well, just to be awkward. Yes, to be awkward, because they don't want old Jews who'll be a burden on the state going to Israel. They want healthy young Jews of childbearing age and fighting age to go and join the IDF. That's what they want to do. So that's what Uncle Sam is up to. But, well, this isn't the first time I've said it, but there seems to be a certain reluctance by Jews to accept this theory of mine. I've gone off the subject, I do apologize. So, how I've already explained to you about the punishment for Jews, for people who claim to be Jews, that they would have a severe punishment indeed, because, if you're claiming to be a Jew, then you're subject to the Jewish punishment, right? And of course, if you're Christian, well, if you meet God and you can't explain the Trinity to him, then I guess, you're guilty of idolatry. And if you're Muslim, basically anybody claiming to be whatever religion would be subject to those rules. So Hindus, bad Hindus will go on to a worse life, and this applies to Buddhists too, and go on to a better life if they've been good in their current life. So where does it leave atheists? Atheists would, yes, they would be accused of idolatry, which is a mortal sin. Because they're worshipping their own opinions, right? They discount the opinions of God, and even they say, "Oh, it's not just my opinion. I believe in Christopher Hitchens," and it's like, well, you're worshipping his stupid ideas, and now that you know that I exist, says God, you're for it. But some people have asked whether there will be segregation in hell. And this is something I'd like to consider. So, I'm afraid for Jews, it'll be a terrible place. It's almost unimaginable that even the best Jew will escape some kind of afterlife punishment with the 36 capital punishments of the Torah. And of course, if you die Christian and God is not Jesus, then, well, they will be in hell, and there will be lots of Christians. It'll be a very big section if there is, segregation according to the religious groups. I've said previously that if you're a good Hindu, you become a Buddhist, because it's like snakes and ladder and different levels, so you climb up a level. And if you've been a bad Hindu, you will be born again as Christian, and as a Christian you would be subject to all the temptations of thinking you can get away with hypocrisy, telling lies that you believe in Jesus is God, and because you see, what I've heard Rabbi say is that if you don't even respect the first commandment, not to worship other gods, then you will just be more susceptible to all the other sins that are listed in the Noahide laws. And this, I think, is psychologically accurate. If you don't think God is watching you, if you haven't allowed God into the gates of your mind to be its policeman and conscience, you will continue to break laws and be subject to the punishments that your law breaking attracts. So atheists, which section will they go to? Well, I think there would be an interview, so the atheist, wakes up and thinks, I thought I was dead. Oh, I'm in God's waiting room, and he will soon be summoning me for an interview. What shall I say? And what would God say to the atheist? I suppose he would say, well, what have you got to say for yourself, atheist, now that you know that I exist? And then I suppose there would be a bit of playing around with the atheist, and I don't know. If I were God, I would make them kind of say, "Do you think you pass the exam? Do you think you pass the exam, Earthling? You think you pass the exam? Would you like to guess if you're going to heaven or hell? Would you like to incriminate yourself? The Fifth Amendment does not apply in God's waiting room. Do you think you made it to heaven, or do you think you'll, because every lie you tell is going to aggravate the offence? So I think these interrogations will be quite fun to watch, and probably quite fun to conduct if you got the file. So atheists, what should happen to atheists? I suppose they would say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I just couldn't believe you. And then I suppose God might ask, he must have, been the recipient of, Christians or Muslims who've tried to convert you, surely. And I suppose that soul would have to say yes or no, and then I guess God would say, well, why didn't, if you have a chance to choose between Christianity and Islam, which one would you choose? And then the person would choose, and then I guess they'd be, sent back and reincarnated as a Christian or a Muslim, whichever one they are. They said they were. I think that would be the merciful thing to do. Thank you for all your comments. I will read them now. Oh, you're so sweet, so sweet. I do like having fans. Now, Peppy says, PVK's logic on the afterlife during this recent rant was pretty stupid, where he argues that if the Jesus myth is not true, then life is meaningless. Talk about lack of metaphysical depth. So it's Christianity or bust, is it? I mean, I get it. That's why he doesn't want to talk to me. It's only if God is, because if Christianity is not true, you still have the option of Islam, right? And because of his Islamophobia, he can't even contemplate it as a possible choice. A mystery in philosophy, as in science, simply means the unknowable, which doesn't infer meaninglessness just because we can't comprehend, based on a perspectival dilemma. So there will be this afterlife interview, and then there'll be all these souls in the waiting room, and then it's the turn of the Christian, and the Christian knocks, and he hears a voice saying, "Come in." And then he enters a room, and there's some invisible person, invisible being, whose voice can be heard clearly, going through a clipboard, full of his life's events and his sins. You're the Christian, aren't you? And wait for the answer. Were you expecting to see Jesus? Would you like to share your feelings about now that you're here? And do you think you might meet Jesus a bit later, or are you now ready to conclude that you're not going to be meeting Jesus because he's not God? Well, there's certain, there are lots of dramatical possibilities, and perhaps one day I'll see a few plays on the subject. Pick and Choose says, I certainly would never make salvation dependent on the accuracy of one's beliefs. No, it's nothing to do with beliefs. It's moral reasoning, isn't it? So I've been explaining about moral reasoning. I've explained that you need religion to measure the moral worth of an individual and also the status of the religious group in question. Just to know, which group is doing better and which group is doing worse and why, and all that kind of thing, so you can work out which one to choose. And okay, you may think Jews are most high status people, but not everybody can be Jews or wants to be Jews, and so they must have plan B. If you're part of the cosmos and inside of the object of the cosmos, then it is impossible to know what is outside of the object, meaning we can't even fathom anything about a creator. Well, you just choose to believe, don't you? I mean, this is the whole thing. Do you think there was a creation? If so, there must have been a creator. And even if you think the Abrahamic God is but the imagination of somebody hoping to use God as a means of social and political control, well, it still means that you have to obey the laws of God if you want to continue the existence of your group that claims to believe in this belief system. I don't know why you're talking about your big toe in Walmart, Peppy. Pick and Choose says, an honest atheist has no need to be sorry for it. One can only believe what they can actually believe. Some people maybe a lot of people, just pretend to believe and fight the cognitive dissonance. Well, I think you just have to want to believe, and then you believe, right? Because really, nobody can tell you if God definitely exists or definitely doesn't exist. So it's 50-50, and it's nothing. So you make a moral choice. But I think you can understand that if people believed that the law of their land is based on God's laws, they are more likely to obey it. And this means that they will be more likely to cooperate with each other and not be, murdering and robbing and raping each other. And this would make them a more cohesive group and be capable of great things. So that's the purpose of religion, isn't it? Pick and Choose says, my first comment is missing. I wonder if it got accidentally deleted. I was saying I'd arrange the afterlife by healing every evildoer until they're fit for heaven, then bring them to heaven. I have not seen your first comment. Okay, well that's been nice, but the process of reincarnation is already well known. So reincarnation is basically there to allow people who, it's like a remove class, right? You haven't. There's a technical term for it. In English, it's called a remove class, which means a remove form. So you don't go on to the next. You just have to study something that you hadn't studied in order to be prepared to for the next step of your academic journey. Maybe it's an old remove form education. Remove brackets education. In the context of British public schools, a remove is a traditional year group or class typically positioned between the fourth and fifth form, serving as an intermediate level for students aged 14 to 15, often equivalent to modern year 10. The term originally described pupils who were removed from the shell form, junior alcos, to a higher academic level, though at some institutions like Wilson's Grammar School, it historically denoted a class of students held back or resitting ordinary level exams. What's it called in America when you have to stay back 1 year? There's something I know. What is it called in education when you have to stay back 1 year because you did not pass, did not achieve the required educational standard? Grade retention, that's the one. This educational practice is primarily called grade retention, also known as repeating a year, non-promotion, or failing a grade. It describes a process where students who do not reach a specific standard of learning are required to join a class of younger students the following academic year, rather than being promoted. In the United States, this is frequently mandated by third grade retention laws, requiring students to demonstrate reading proficiency before moving to fourth grade. For secondary students, retention is often limited to specific failed subjects rather than the entire year. Yeah. So reincarnation is kind of like this. And obviously we want to, not be held back in our journey to heaven. Big and Jew says, I believe every evildoer is so because they're being maimed, confused, infected, or hijacked by evil. I don't think a healthy soul intentionally seeks corruption. But you know the Lord's Prayer. You know what it says. It's already implied that God, having told you his laws, will every now and then test you for your ability to tell the difference between right and wrong in theory and in practice. I mean, that's the role of Satan. So I'm afraid you can't nanny these people. They have to learn on their own. So, particularly when you tell them, right, I've been telling these people and they've been pretending not to understand. And then there's all this stuff in the Bible about stiff-necked people and people, then the none so blind as those who will not see, and none so deaf as those who will not hear. All this stuff, being willfully blind, it's already warned against. It's nothing new. And so when they have received notice, it doesn't matter if it's from, someone else or whether it's me. I think I've made myself reasonably clear. They're basically saying they would rather die and go to hell more than once if necessary, just to show their hatred of Muslims and Islam. That's what they're saying. Or they're taking a risk. So they think, oh, well, it's all a bunch of crap. We don't believe in it, but we're going to pretend to believe in it because we need, something to dignify our racism, our chauvinism, our hatred, our bigotry, our willful ignorance, right? And this is what they do. They can't talk about it, because they have no answer. You hear them. Oh, I'm going to hell. Everybody's going to hell. Oh dear. And the only way to beg for mercy is to pray for mercy, and this can only be done through praying to Jesus. And then it's like, yeah, and you're just compounding your idolatry again. Maybe God punishes you for every time you keep thinking or conceiving in your mind. You conceive of God as Jesus, and boom, you're guilty and of idolatry. It's had a separate. It's an act of idolatry, right? It's a thought crime every time you think of Jesus as God or God as Jesus. You're guilty of this thought crime of idolatry. Moral reasoning comes from mythos, whereas ethical reasoning comes from logos. The two terms are not synonymous. And moral reasoning is it's what I do, right? What's the difference between moral and the ethical reasoning? So obviously we have to know what morality is, and I say morality is a system of rules designed to keep the group in existence and apart from others. Right? This is it. And then obviously every religion is a different moral system. And I know people will say, well, yeah, Christianity is the biggest and most powerful group because it is represented by the most powerful empire. But it is the most evil empire. It is, Christians are known for their rampant militarism, their warlike characteristics, their grandiose plans for global domination, their European wars of religion, their American Civil War, their World War One and World War Two, and soon their World War Three, started by them. So, well, maybe they should examine their consciences, if any. If they might not have one to examine, but they could find one once they know what it is that they're supposed to believe, once they've chosen their moral system. So this is what I'm trying to do to help them. If you don't have any principles, go and find some. And I'm saying, yeah, I totally get it that you should find a religion that worships the most powerful God with the clearest scripture of widest application, that is least restrictive on your liberty. And I'm saying, obviously, it's the one that allows you freedom of belief and expression, and it must be the one that supports the First Amendment. And we know it's not Christianity that supports the First Amendment, because we know that heretic burning is a a uniquely Christian practice. And we know that Jews are very hot on blasphemy, because that is what they were supposed to have executed Jesus for. So if we don't want to end up like Jesus, and we don't want to worship idols, or be compelled by our absolute monarch to worship idols, we would have to choose the one that supports the First Amendment. What's so hard about that? I just don't know why it's so difficult. But I suppose, all the people who hate me are not listening to this because they would rather remain willfully blind. And even if they do understand what I'm saying, they're going to pretend not to understand. The big toe point. Oh, I don't know. I'm getting tired. The Yahweh's concept of good and evil was adopted during the Persian period. Well, I'm sure, good and evil was a pretty generic idea. Oh, in America, it's called being held back. Thank you. Hello, the freak. Well, maybe you do need to say more about what you mean about the GEB. Some people say mythos is not really myth as in fiction. I recently heard some academic trying to say that. I think it was Ian McGilchrist. What's not about morality? I'm afraid, the freak, you're guilty of anthropomorphism again. Principles derived from nature, not principles derived from. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, you see, the freak, it always repeats this, and it never makes sense. But I guess he was injected with the Trinity, and it will always stay with him. Well, how would you know that getting into heaven isn't about morality, unless you are trying to say that God's laws are not moral? But then why would you be the expert on morality? What is the core of morality? Pick and choose. As I understand, morality is a system of rules designed to keep a group in existence and apart from others, and you can deduce it from the existence of the Jews and the existence of Christians and the existence of Muslims. So obviously, their religion makes them an identifiable and powerful religious group. So if what we want to do is be part of a powerful group, this is what we do. We choose a religious group that will give us our morals and a dignifying wrapper that will protect us. Listen, a dead man has no authority. And to say that a dead man is alive, well, you'd have to prove it. And you won't be able to. And it's idolatry. Yes, I would say that Logos is natural law. And it is the ability. Logos is basically deductive reasoning, such as being able to deduce that if there was a creation, there must have been a creator. And that creator must have been the Abrahamic God all these Jews, Christians, and Muslims are going on about. And as far as we know, it's the most powerful God conceivable. And we can deduce that if we want to worship a deity, we should worship the most powerful one. If money isn't an object. I really don't see what the problem of having a nation of thinking workers. I mean, you can't keep a good man down. Obviously you're going to train him to do useful things for rich people. But if that person were minded to keep himself informed and likes discussing ideas, then he can educate himself afterwards. I mean, for most people, their education happens afterwards. I mean, I learned most of my stuff after I left school, didn't I? So the best your school can do is inculcate an attitude that is conducive to learning and finding knowledge useful. It is shocking that so many people didn't go to my school and don't have my attitude. I mean, do you really need to be told that knowledge is power? But then we live in a degenerate society. So before I go, this is how I would organize heaven and hell. So I guess the Jewish one is it's not going to be much fun. It'll just be an endless queue of Jews queuing up to discharge their capital punishments, and it will take the form of beheading, burning, stoning, and strangulation, according to the Talmud. Christians, they'll be given a difficult interview by God, and then they will be invited to choose the religion of their parents, because they'll be given another chance. And of course, it will be mortifying for people who maybe have met me and know what I say, and they still, died Christian. Then I suppose, but they'd be more in a position to answer correctly, right? And I suppose God would think, yes, good boy, good girl, you chose correctly the religion of your parents in your next life. Of course, it's going to be Islam if you want to get to heaven ASAP. But if you want to, feel around and find out, you can always choose to be Christian again, or Hindu, or Buddhist. FAFO. So, what about Hindus? Yeah, I mean, Hindus would just be a constant churn of recycle lives, and the Hindus and the Buddhists would be, well, I think they would be amalgamated. Yeah, they'd be amalgamated, and the atheists would be treated as idolaters, and Hindus, yeah, they'd be amalgamated with these Hindus and Buddhists, and they go in the churn, and the next time maybe they might choose the right religion, um, and of course Islam would be the fast track because it's only in the Quran that has these vivid descriptions of heaven and hell. So assuming it's all correct and from God, um, becoming Muslim would get you to heaven quicker. But you might be one of those people who want to fuck around and find out. So who knows? So only the Muslim section would be kind of orderly. That there would be of course a hell section, and then there would be a heaven section, and but ultimately it will be on record how many times it took us to choose the right religion. And some people get it immediately. Some people can go from the worst, Christianity, to Islam in one step. Others will fuck around and find out, and they might choose to be a Hindu, they might choose to be a Buddhist, they might even choose to be a Jew because they envy them so much, and they'll fuck around and find out. So this is how I imagine the afterlife will be organized. Of course, I don't know, but I think it's worth thinking about, isn't it? That it's all, this whirl of activity, except for Muslim heaven and Muslim hell. And in the meantime, all these recycled souls will be, well, which religion did he choose this time after, finding out that Jesus is not God? Did he say, I'm going to be Catholic again because I hate Muslims so much. I just want to make a point. I want to be Catholic again. And then I guess he will have his wish granted. Or you will have the rare distinction of being the first, I don't know, first 100,000 whatever to get to heaven with a minimum of reincarnation, right? I think Christians of this century would be better informed, because of the cosmopolitan nature of most countries. That there will be a lot of Muslims and exchange of ideas. So even if you died Christian, well, I mean, it's just sort of better to say, oh, I just managed to get out of being Christian before I died because I converted, and I don't have this stupid interview with God. But you could still, fall into sin, and anyway, and not even get to heaven as Muslim. But you'll still be near the top, I suppose. You'll know which religion to choose. So what I'm trying to say is that you're more informed, you're more theologically informed if you live in the 21st century because, of the internet, and YouTube and people telling you that Christianity is idolatry, which you can choose to completely ignore because you never believed that God exists to punish anyone for anything anyway. But you could direct your mind to the hereafter. After all, we all know we won't live forever, and so there is a correct answer, isn't there? I hope I've set it up, reasonably clearly for you all, that Islam is a logical choice, even if you don't believe in God, because at least it will give you, enough freedom of action to break those rules without being discovered, and thereby, cause your current life to be better than it otherwise would be, where the punishment fits a crime, and it's not just the degenerate matriarchy choosing ever more corrupt and incompetent rulers to boss you around. So I'm saying it just takes a flip of the mind, a flick of the switch to correct yourself. And I'm hoping that I have directed my message to somebody who is, in theory, capable of understanding what I'm saying and acting upon it. Admittedly, there will be risks and controversy in in this time of war and moral confusion, but I am confident that I have all the answers and arguments, in theory at least. And also, a plan to get the message across. So thank you all for listening.